Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name's Jeremy. I'm leading these sessions, Monday night sessions this month. This is our third. I think we could give this series of sessions the term "Don't believe everything you think," which is something I stole from the title of a book. That's what we're talking about. So these sessions, I think most of you have been to them before, but we just do some meditation, and I talk a bit about Buddhist ideas and practices, particularly the ones that I've found personally to be useful. If I were a Buddha, then I'd be able to teach you exactly what you need to hear for your own personal development, but unfortunately I don't have those clairvoyant powers, so I just talk about what I found to be useful, and I can talk about that with more conviction and explain why it's been useful for me. And we'll do have some question and answer time, so we have good discussion. So feel free, if a question comes up as I'm talking, just remember it and raise it. And as I often say, the Buddha encouraged people to challenge his ideas, so you're invited to challenge any of these ideas and raise objections. That's fine. So as I said, the theme, don't believe everything you think. So the technical term for this in Buddhism is inappropriate attention. So what we're talking about here is things appearing to our mind in a deceptive way. So appearing differently to how they actually exist. And the Buddha was saying that we have actually quite a lot of this going on in our lives. So normally we think that the world is out there and we're perceiving it as it is, more or less. But the Buddha's challenging this and saying a lot of what we experience is actually projected by our mind onto the world. And so last week we were talking about attachment and aversion and how we project exaggerated positive and negative qualities onto people and other things. And then after projecting those qualities onto them, then we read those qualities back as though they were existing from the side of the person or the object, and then we respond to those perceived qualities. So we don't notice that we're actually projecting those onto them, onto the person or the object. So that's attachment and aversion. And tonight I'll talk about permanence and impermanence. So this is also a central theme in Buddhist practice, is meditating on impermanence. In Tibetan the word is mitakpa. And the reason that we meditate on impermanence is because we tend to project permanence onto things. Anyway, we can go into that in more detail in a minute. But firstly we'll do some meditation, including meditation on impermanence. So meditation, as you probably know, just means familiarizing your mind with a mental object which has the effect of making your mind more peaceful and clear, and also bringing your mind more in touch with reality, so your understanding of how things are, correctly understanding how things are. For example, understanding that things are impermanent. So that's what we're trying to achieve when we meditate. So we're bringing that object to mind and making our mind familiar with that positive object, so it has the effect of training our mind to be familiar with that, so it comes up more easily in our mind, and also has the effect of becoming less familiar with negative mental objects, negative states of mind They're the ones that are disturbing our mind, making our mind upset or feeling anxious or depressed or angry. Things that disturb our mind and make us perform actions which harm ourselves and others. So it's important to mention that the whole purpose of doing these practices is to make our minds happy, but also to develop positive qualities so that we can be more helpful to others. So it's important to mention, and this is in traditional Buddhist practice, the session or the meditation or the teaching will always start with practices which are for setting your motivation, which means making your motivation, the reason why you're doing this practice, as positive as possible. And so the most positive motivation from a Buddhist point of view is the aim to benefit others. So we're aiming to remove our own problems, but not just so that we can make ourselves happy, mostly so that we can benefit the people around us, or at least not harm them, so removing harmful thoughts and actions. So this has said to make the practice much more powerful if we have this sort of broad and expansive motivation for doing it. So that's something to experiment with. So even when we're doing breath meditation, if you think, I'm not just doing this to make my own mind peaceful and happy, but also so that I'm more useful and beneficial and helpful and kind to people around me. Okay, so we'll start by doing the breath meditation, that same as we did in the last 2 weeks. So just sit in a posture which you find comfortable for meditation. Normally it's helpful to have your back straight to prevent drowsiness. And your eyes partially closed, just letting a little bit of light in, stops distraction and also prevents sleepiness by allowing some light to come in. Sitting with your legs crossed is also good if possible, but don't worry if you can't. And then just bring your attention to your body and observe your body. How is your body feeling? Just relax your body, let go of any tension you're holding. It can be helpful to exhale. Feel that you're breathing out any stress or concerns or just mental busyness. And then bring your attention to your breath moving in and out. So we're just observing the breath moving in and out. And you can focus your mind particularly on the point under the tip of your nose, of the breath moving in and out past that point. So we're focusing on the breath because it's a neutral object. It doesn't give rise to attachment or aversion. So focusing on the breath has the effect of pacifying discursive thought, which is the habit of the mind constantly jumping from one thing to the other, one mental object to the next. So we call that the monkey mind. It's jumping around all the time. So what we're trying to do here is just give that monkey mind a rest, have a break from constant discursive thought, constantly moving from one thing to the next. So if we're able to stop the discursive thought, just relax it for a few minutes, we find our mind immediately becomes more peaceful, calm and happy. It's a bit like turning off background music that you weren't aware was on, but when you turn it off, it feels like a relief. So letting go of the discursive thought and just resting your mind on a neutral object like the breath is giving your mind a break from that constant activity. So we're using mindfulness to remember the object of our attention, which is the breath. So mindfulness is keeping that in mind, remembering that we're focusing on that. And we use alertness to observe the mind to see whether it's wandering off or staying on the object of attention. And when it does wander, we bring it back to that point. Just return it to the point of focus. You might find it useful to count the breaths to keep your mind focused. Some people find it useful, other people find that distracting. So you can experiment with what works best for you. Okay, so now that we have developed some degree of concentration, we can use that concentration to do analytical meditation. And in this analytical meditation, we are investigating the idea of impermanence, or the quality of impermanence. So what we mean here by impermanence is momentary, as in changing from moment to moment. And we're doing this to overcome the incorrect belief or incorrect appearance of permanence, which we tend to grasp onto. So if you think firstly about your own body, and how every part of your body is impermanent, changing from moment to moment. So even though we tend to think, this is my body, the same body I had this morning or yesterday, actually when we investigate we find that everything in the body is constantly changing. So if you think firstly about the various systems that are operating in your body, such as the respiratory system, breathing. So that's obviously constantly moving. Breathing about 550 litres of oxygen a day. And then our circulatory system, cardiovascular, meaning the blood pumping around our body. Obviously changing, on the move all the time, up to 60 centimetres per second. And then our digestive system, digesting food, turning it into fuel, up to 2 kilograms a day. So these are all systems that are constantly operating in our body, working around the clock. So we can think of our body as like a collection of parts and systems, constantly on the move, which immediately challenges our normal view of the body as being this somehow solid, permanent entity that we inhabit or possess. And then you think of all the various structures in the body, the internal organs, and all the muscles, so these are also momentary, changing, not staying static for even a moment. And then even our bones, which seem the most solid part of our body, also constantly changing. The cells are being constantly reproduced. So the microstructures in our body, we have all the parts made up of cells, apparently 100 trillion of them. And then within the cells we have the nucleus and the chromosomes. Within that the DNA, within that the molecules, down to the atomic level. And then even the subatomic particles, such as protons, which are moving at 400 kilometers a second, apparently. And then we also think we have things like quarks which are moving at the speed of light. So down at the microstructural level, everything is constantly moving and changing. Nothing is static. So we just focus on that feeling of our body being a collection of constantly moving parts and systems. Just familiarize your mind with that thought. Just hold that in your mind for a moment. And then you apply the same analysis to your mind. You think about your mind, what your mind is made up of. So you see that your mind is also a collection of constantly moving factors or thoughts, ideas, impressions, sensory perceptions, concepts. So we might tend to think that I am like this, or I'm like that, or I have these certain fixed qualities. But when we examine, we find that there's nothing fixed in the mind. It's all constantly moving. We can't find anything which we can point to that is static. Or can you? Ask yourself that question. Is there anything in my mind which is static? Can you point to something which is unchanging? And then extend the same analysis out to the external world. So all the people around us, constantly changing in the same way that we are. And all of the physical objects also constantly changing. Even the things that appear the most solid, like the ground, mountains, rocks. We know, at least on the atomic level, they're constantly changing, and that eventually they will disintegrate, change form. So what we're trying to do here is just generate our perception of ourselves and the world as being impermanent, constantly changing, in a constant state of flux, and not fixed for even a moment. So this is to challenge our normal view of the world, of things being fixed and unchanging, and the tendency to grasp onto things as being unchanging when in fact they are changing. So just focus your mind on this feeling of this whole world being constantly changing, impermanent, not stopping still for even a second. And this is supposed to be a pleasant experience, by the way. It might seem a bit maybe alarming at first, but the idea is that understanding things as being impermanent in the way that they are is actually a way of making your mind happier and more peaceful. Okay, so when you're ready, just relax your concentration. Okay, how did you go with that? Any thoughts or questions or complaints? Some people do find that makes them a bit anxious, that thought that everything is moving and there's nothing static to hold on to. So I think that's a good example of. It shows clearly the difference between knowledge and wisdom, I think, because the idea of impermanence is actually quite a simple one. The idea that things are constantly changing, that they're momentary, and we can sort of intellectually say, "Oh yeah, I know that. I know about atoms and molecules; they're always moving." But when we really sort of internalize that understanding, you can see how it, or maybe tell me if you disagree, but I think you can see how it changes your view of the world and yourself. And so that would be wisdom, when your mind is sort of internalizing that understanding and it's informing your experience and how you experience the world. You can see, like in the way that we talk, we often project permanence onto things. You use phrases like, I'm so lazy, or he's so aggressive, or these sort of judgments that we put on people. But then if you analyze, you can see that that person is constantly changing. But when we're projecting those qualities onto them, we're projecting a sort of permanent quality. We're ignoring the fact that that person is changing from moment to moment. And so even though we have this fixed idea of how they are, he's like that, she's like that, I'm like this, that actually those ideas are all based on a projection of permanence. And when we examine, you can't find anything within that person or within yourself which is continuing from moment to moment in an unchanging way. So that's something we need to check up. Do you think when you're doing that, something to look at your mind and see? So intellectually, we say, oh yeah, I know I'm always changing. I know that they're always changing. But we still have this tendency to project those sort of qualities onto people, don't we? Even onto groups, they're like that, and they're like that. But this is all based on this sort of mistaken view of some kind of unchanging essence. Yes, sure, feel free, as I go along. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So some things certainly appear to be permanent, don't they? Like, yeah. Mm. Yeah. 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 No, it's a good point. And I think that's an idea that we often have about ourselves and about other people, that there are we find there's certain characteristics about ourselves and others that appear to be fixed. Like I sort of think of myself as quite lazy and have felt like that most of my life. There's some kind of trait that I have. But so that's the challenge. Like, then you have to ask the question: is that a fixed quality? Like, and if it is, like, where is it? So just because something is lasting for a long time, you know, like throughout my life I've had this trait, doesn't necessarily mean that it's, yeah. So that's the idea. So you can have something which is continuing for a long time, but is still changing from moment to moment. You can't find any unchanging essence. So I guess, for example, like a river would be an analogy of that. So a river could flow for thousands of years, but it doesn't, it's changing from moment to moment. So I guess these lasting traits would be, you know, regarded like that. Hmm. No, yeah. Yeah, I think the latter. Yeah, that so they appear to be unchanging, but they are actually changing, and the proof that they are changing is because eventually they can stop. You know, for example, we might find in the earlier part of our life we had certain strong traits, like, you know, being very anxious about some things, and later on in life we find no longer a problem. So it proves that they don't last forever, and that they were caused by something. So when this cause stopped causing it, then they can disappear. Yeah. So that's the idea. So that's a really important point in terms of like spiritual progress, because we tend to have this feeling that we're kind of stuck in these traits that we have, and, you know, we may dislike them intensely, aspects of our personality, and feel sort of trapped in them. But if we see that they are impermanent, changing from moment to moment, even though they're lasting, and we can't find anything permanent, you know, when we analyse, that's liberating, because you can see that they're just arising because the causes and conditions are there, and you know, we can be free of them by removing the causes and conditions. Mm. Sorry? Well, I guess it depends how you define them, but you could still call them traits, I think, but they're not permanent. They're lasting, but they're not unchanging from moment to moment. And they're caused. They're arising because of causes and conditions.
And there are perceptions. Someone might think you're lazy, but someone else might think you're lazy.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So that's another example of how we're projecting these qualities onto a person, and they're relative to our perspective of that person. Yeah. And ourselves, yeah. 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 To our perspective. That's right, yeah. So last week I used the example of our cat, who I regard as kind of cute and fluffy and a bit mad, but still cute. But then you look at the cat from the perspective of a mouse or a cicada, who she likes to kill, and she's a big sort of massive killing machine. So both of myself and the mouse, we're projecting these qualities onto her. And when I project that kind of cute, fluffy quality onto her, I'm not seeing it as something that's coming from my mind. I'm seeing it as coming from her. And the mouse is doing the same thing, is seeing this terrifying killing machine. It doesn't see it as projection from its perspective. So that's how we see the world, very much from our own perspective, when we're projecting things onto the world. But we don't notice that we're doing that, is the point, yeah. And one of the things we're projecting is this permanent quality, is unchanging quality. So I'm projecting a sort of permanent quality of cuteness onto the cat, and the mouse is doing the same thing, permanent quality of terrifyingness. And so not seeing, and and seeing that it's somehow inherent or unchanging quality of that object. So that's the point. Well, it is, yeah, depending on your perspective. Yeah. Well, it's both, and it depends on your perspective. Yeah. So the Buddha is saying that the whole world is like that. Everything in our world is like that. That we're projecting onto these things based on our own perspective. And when you check up, you can't find those things from the side of the object. That's the point. Yeah. So the purpose of question. Yeah.
Why do we do that? Like, how did that start? If everything appears as it really does, and we don't perceive it as that.
Why do we do that? Yeah, very good question. Yeah. So the Buddhist answer is something I think it's sort of based on fear, that we are kind of trying to find something solid to grasp onto. And so we project this solidness because we want certainty, and because we find our state to be somewhat vulnerable, or yeah. But making sense in the sense of wanting some kind of security, I think that's why we're projecting a sort of permanence. I was thinking today, like you noticed in it's a bit of a tangent. You notice in the world at the moment, global politics, there's a sort of bit of a lurch to the right wing, like in Europe and in America, Trumpism. And I'm thinking that seems to me a bit of a reaction to sort of anxiety. I don't know, tell me what you think of this armchair geopolitical theory. But when people become sort of more anxious, that they might sort of grasp more onto those sort of extreme sort of... it seems much more concrete and certain, that kind of view of the right-wing politics. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but that's my understanding of the Buddhist explanation. Is we're looking, we have this idea of I in this world, and then around this I we have these objects, some appearing to be pleasant, some appearing to be unpleasant, some sort of neutral, and we're trying to bring all the pleasant ones close to us and trying to push the unpleasant people and objects away or distance ourselves from them. And so we're trying to get sort of certainty and security and clarity. But what the Buddha's saying is that this whole situation is largely a product of our own mind. We've created this situation for ourselves, where it's sort of me against the universe, and the universe is made up of these attractive or pleasant things and unpleasant things and neutral things, and we're constantly trying to negotiate it so that keep all the nice things close and push all the bad things away. So I think that's a really interesting idea. But it really puts the emphasis on the fact that these things are projected by our mind. So that term, inappropriate attention, that I mentioned in the beginning, is the idea that we're projecting these qualities onto the object. And when we analyse, we find that we can't find them there. Or can we? That's something we have to check up. Yes, question?
I have a question that might be a bit unrelated to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But, like, from my understanding in Buddhism, the mind is seen as beginningless and endless.
Yeah.
So does that mean that, like, it could be considered permanent, like, in its existence?
Yeah, good point, yeah. So in the Buddhist presentation, the mind is said to be beginningless and endless, so it's like a constant series of of moments in the mind, of the mind, so it continues from one life to the next and doesn't have a beginning or an end. So I think that would be more like the river analogy, where you have something that's constantly moving and changing, but can still go on forever, sort of, because each moment is giving rise to the next moment. So that's an interesting idea, whether you believe it or not. It's an interesting idea, and also that the mind is immutable or indestructible, so it can never be destroyed. So the mind is very sort of important or central in the Buddhist sort of presentation of how things are, which is quite different to a lot of modern Western neuroscience, I would say, where the mind is regarded as some kind of epiphenomenon of the brain. So it's a very different view of the world. Did that answer your question? Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Good questions. So, as I said, the reason that we meditate on impermanence is to overcome this belief in permanence. So, we're projecting permanent onto the things around us that aren't permanent. And we're accepting that appearance. So again, this is something, you don't just have to accept from me, it's something we need to check up. Is that what's happening in our mind? Are we projecting permanence onto things that are impermanent? And then, as I said, because we're projecting permanent onto the people and the objects around us, based on that, then it gives rise to these other projections of good and bad, attractive and unattractive. So we label attractive quality onto a person or a thing, and we see that as somehow an unchanging quality. And then because we see that as an unchanging quality, we're drawn towards it or want to sort of own that object or grasp it. Or in the same way with aversion, we're pushing those unattractive things away. And then these states of mind of attachment and aversion, when they grow stronger, then they become these so-called afflictive emotions or afflictive states of mind. So obvious one is anger. So as the aversion becomes stronger, then we have stronger feelings of wanting to push people away, even by harming them. And with attachment, strong feelings of craving and grasping, and, for example, feeling frustrated if you can't get that thing that you want. So all of the afflictive emotions, the things that are bothering us in our day-to-day life, we can generally trace them back to arising from attachment and aversion. So I think, for example, with me, I was talking about my laziness. So I think laziness is regarded as a state of mind arising from attachment. So I'd rather be doing nothing than doing something, or doing something. In Buddhism, there's 3 types of laziness, which is, it's a bit annoying, but there's 3 types of laziness. One is the laziness of not wanting to do anything, like lying on the couch. And then there's the laziness which is called busy laziness, where you're busy doing something but it's not really meaningful. That's called the laziness of busyness. So a lot of Tibetan lamas like to say, you guys in the West, you're very, very good at the busy laziness. You're busy doing stuff but not sure it's very meaningful. So that's a bit hard to take. And then the third type is the laziness of self-deprecation, which is a really interesting one, where we think, oh, I'm so hopeless, I'm so useless, there's no point trying. So I think I've got all 3 of those, plenty of those, which is a bit humiliating. But again, so I was saying that arises from attachment. So attachment to doing sort of meaningless things, or attachment to lying on the couch or on the beach or whatever. So this is just states of mind that arise, for whatever reason. It's just, we have, as you said, we have these traits that arise in our mind, and they're arising because of certain, so the Buddhist explanation would be we've familiarised our mind with them in the past, in past lives, and we don't need to feel bad about them or stress about them. We can just accept that we have them, acknowledge them, and then look at what's causing them, and then begin to work on sort of making them less powerful in our mind. So one of the ways we do that is by looking at the misconceptions that they arise from. So as I said, with attachment, the misconception is exaggerating the good qualities of that object, or that thing, or that activity. So lying on the couch, you might think, oh, it's so nice just to lie and do nothing, or on the beach. And so your mind is projecting some kind of exaggerated quality onto that inactivity. But probably after an hour or so, or a few hours maybe, you begin to get bored, and then it would lose its attractiveness. So that attractive quality, you can see that it's not coming from the side of the object, otherwise it would stay there and it would continue to be pleasant, but after a while it loses its pleasantness. So even lying on a beautiful beach could become boring after a few hours or a few days. A friend of mine was living in an island in the Caribbean for a while, and she said it was just too perfect and just felt like she was going mad after a while. It was like paradise, but it sort of drove her crazy after a while. Anyway, so that's attachment and aversion. So I'd be interested to know from you, do you agree that these qualities of attachment and aversion arise from projecting this some kind of unchanging essence onto something? So you think of a person or a thing or a food, or you think of your favourite food, and when you're thinking of how delicious that food is, are you projecting some kind of unchanging deliciousness onto that, chocolate ice cream, or with the are you projecting some kind of unchanging quality onto that? So something we need to check up in our mind. So intellectually we know, of course that thing is not permanent. It's, we know, like on an atomic level at least, and we know that the cheesecake or the ice cream is going to melt, within an hour. So it's constantly changing. But are we relating to it in our mind as some kind of having some kind of permanent, delicious quality? So that's what the Buddha is saying, that we're projecting this sort of unchanging essence onto things, and then based on that exaggerating their good or bad qualities. So I was thinking about this during the week. One example, I was getting irritated with one of my family members, and I was thinking the way they're appearing to me in that moment is having some kind of permanent annoyingness, or so with your family members, they can appear really lovely one day and really annoying the next day, but then you examine that appearance and there's almost like two different people. You're just so filled with love with them for one day, and then they're just so annoying you just want to get away from them the next day. It's like two completely different objects. And so you examine how that person is appearing to your mind at that time, whether that's sort of somehow some kind of unchanging nature that we're projecting onto that person. And I was thinking, like, when you're having some kind of dispute with someone close to you, that you tend to sort of have this feeling like you just sort of remember all of the times when they've been annoying like that in the past. It's like you join all those moments up in your mind, and you say things like, "You're always, like, you never listen to me," or "You're so unreliable," or and so in your mind you're just sort of joining up all these moments and this sort of projecting this sort of permanent, long and you're thinking also that they're going to continue being like that in the future. So that's kind of also why you're angry, because you think they're going to continue being annoying in the same way in the future. You never listen to me. You've never really loved me. You don't really care about me. So I think you can see how in our mind we're having this sort of appearance of some kind of permanent, unchanging quality. People say things like, I can't go on like this. I can't take this anymore. So they're putting this idea of something that's sort of long-lasting. It's going to go on in the future. There's sort of like this solid, big problem that's appearing to your mind in that moment.
From a Buddhist perspective, how should you be?
Yeah, so...
Luckily to reframe it.
Yeah, well, the first thing would be just to observe that appearance. You know, so you have some appearance of someone being really annoying. Just observe it. How does it appear to your mind? And then analyze it. So, is this person appearing in some kind of unchanging way? Think, yeah, okay, they're appearing as some kind of solid, unchanging, annoying person in this moment. And then, so you think, well, that's actually not true, is it? Because you know that that person is actually changing from moment to moment. You know they were really nice maybe the previous day, and they could be really nice the next day. So you've got to. So what we're trying to do here is analyze that appearance and see how it's a mistaken projection onto that person. That's what we're trying to do. Well, that's the first step. Just to see how it's something image created by your mind and projecting onto that person, and it's not how they actually exist, because we know that they're just a collection of thoughts and parts and motions and traits and states, and they're just all of those things, but we're projecting this solid unchangingness entity onto them in that moment, and we're reacting to that appearance. Yeah. So that's yeah. Yeah.
Because they agree you 90%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, at times, you don't know.
Well, you've got to see that is, that appearance is something that your mind has created. For example, there might be someone else in their life who thinks they're wonderful 90% of the time. Yeah. So that immediately shows you, well, who's right here? Am I right, or are they right? And you see that it's something that your mind is creating, this image of them. Yeah. Yeah, so that's right. And some of them are in accordance with reality. So in this case, we're talking about a projection onto that person or object which doesn't accord with reality. We can see that. This image I have of this person or object, it doesn't match how they actually are. So it's a false appearance. And so we're trying to make our understanding of people around us and objects and the whole world, including ourselves, understanding how they actually exist. And the way they actually exist is impermanent. They're changing all the time. So trying to make our mind realistic. So it's actually quite sort of scientific in that way. You're trying to accord your understanding of the world with how it actually is. So one Buddhist teacher said that the whole Buddhist practice is just a long exercise in trying to bring your mind in alignment with reality. That's what you're trying to do. And interestingly, when your mind has a realistic understanding of how things exist, then it immediately becomes more peaceful. So that's really interesting. Well, again, something, don't take it from me, something we need to check up. So when, for example, with impermanence, I was saying before, when you meditate on impermanence and understand that things are impermanent, it should make your mind more peaceful. So something to check up. Does it? Or does it just make you anxious? I think as we get used to it, it becomes more peaceful. Another good example is in terms of grieving. So often, we experience people, some of the greatest suffering they have in their life is grieving from the loss of a loved one. And so the Buddha talked about that quite a lot, and he's saying that's actually, we can see that's because we have projected permanence onto the people around us and invested strongly in that belief in their permanence. For example, in our, our children or our partner or our parents, and we've invested very strongly in this belief that they're going to always be there, or they'll be there for as long as we want them to be there. And so when they suddenly disappear out of our life, they're gone, then it's hugely traumatic for us, because all along we had this view that they were always going to be there. So there's a famous story of a woman who came to the Buddha with her child who had, young child who passed away, completely devastated. And she said, what can I do to about this? And he said, what you should do is get a cup of oil from a family who has never experienced death in their family. And so she went around the whole district asking each household, if they had anyone passed away. And each family, of course, had someone who passed away and told the story of how they'd passed away. And so eventually, after hearing hundreds of these stories about people passing away, and then sort of changed her mind a bit so that she could see that this is actually how things are. Everyone experiences grief and everyone passes away. So this is the idea that through familiarising our mind with the impermanent nature of things, then we don't get so distraught or so hurt when things behave in an impermanent way. That's the idea. So familiarising your mind with the way things actually are is a way of protecting ourselves from being hurt by when they don't behave how we expect. Well, we do, yeah. I mean, it's, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I think the idea is that the reason that's so painful, the reason we miss them so much, is because we were constantly investing in this idea that they're going to be there, and it's sort of like wishful thinking. We know intellectually we can't really say for certain that someone is going to live for as long as we would like them to, for example, or even be in a relationship with us for as long as we'd like them to. None of this we can say with certainty, but still we invest strongly in the wish or the hope that they would stay as long as we'd like them to. So it's trying to familiarise your mind with that reality that things are by nature impermanent, including the people in our lives and our relationships with them. So through familiarising your mind with that idea, that you reduce the level of grasping onto permanence and assuming and investing in the fact that they're going to be there for as long as you want. So then you're not so destroyed when they're suddenly not there. And that includes not just people, but, positions of employment, for example, yeah. So you have a strong attachment or projection onto your position of employment, and this is me, this is what I do, and I'm going to keep doing it for a long time, and then suddenly you get retrenched and you're out of that job, and it can be very traumatic. Okay, so thank you. We're out of time now. Thank you. Hopefully that was useful. So have a think about impermanence and come back to me with your questions, and maybe try some meditation on it. Please stay for tea in the dining room if you'd like to. Thanks. Thank you.